Have you ever felt lots of anxiety, lots of stress? Have you ever been sitting at your house and felt lonely and depressed? If so, make sure you stick around for the rest of this video, because today we're talking about the fact that you are never alone. What's going on, Ignite Youth family? Thank you so much for tuning in today. If we haven't met before, my name's Devan Caswell. I currently head up the youth ministry here at Catch the Fire Boulder. If you want to find out more information about us, you can find it at www.ctfboulder.com. You can find us on Instagram, on TikTok, and also on YouTube. These are all the different platforms that you can find us on. We also post different content on each platform, and I want you guys to stay as updated as possible. Thank you so much for your patience. Let's dive into the video. First things first, I just want to start this off with the definition of the word alone. Having no one else present, having no help or participation from others, isolated and lonely. That word isolation is going to become very key later in this message, so I want you guys to take a mental note of that. But just to start, I just want to talk about social media and technology. See, due to the world of social media and technology that we live in, we have all these superficial connections, but there's really no intimacy within our friendships. I read a study that Americans only have one intimate friendship. Well, every American says that they only have one best friend. And that's sad, the fact that we only have one friend that we can say knows us in and out, that knows us through and through. Because the truth is, as humans, God has placed this desire of intimacy within each of us. See, when God created Adam, he also created Eve. And see, when God created the heavens and the earth and the world, he said that all those things were good. And the first time that we hear God say that something wasn't good is when he created Adam, and he said it's not good for man to be alone. So he created him a helper suitable for him. And so we see that in Genesis 2:8, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. Do your own research, but it's in Genesis chapter 2, and you guys can find it there. But we see that God, since the beginning of time, has placed this desire for intimacy within us, for relationship with him and relationship with one another. But we live in this world of technology and social media where we have all these superficial relationships with one another. And there's scientific studies that were taken 40 years ago and taken currently in 2019 that say high schoolers spend an hour less with each other than they did 40 years ago. Each day that they spend an hour less with each other. And those hours add up a lot. If you spend 365 days with somebody, that's 365 hours you are not spending with somebody, which is a lot. And the study also showed that high schoolers go to fewer parties than they used to back in the 80s. So 40 years ago, they used to go to a lot of parties. Now they're going to 17 fewer get-togethers than they used to back in the day. And part of that is because of the world of technology we live in. And so even though we're more connected than ever, we are plagued with loneliness. And the thing that I want you guys to understand is that it's no coincidence that suicide rates from ages 13 to 18 years old have increased by 20%. So you have to understand that loneliness leads to depression, and depression can lead to a raise in suicide rates. And so since we're plagued with this loneliness and plagued with these superficial connections, it's leading to death, literal death. And that's something that terrifies me. So it's very important that we attack this matter and that we learn the importance of intimacy. And I want you guys to realize that even if you feel lonely, you are never alone. See, even though we're more virtually connected than ever, we're lacking spiritually more than ever. And so it's up to us to start reading our Bible and pursuing God and pursuing that relationship with him, because this epidemic can no longer last. The first thing that I want you guys to walk away with is that loneliness is often a silent killer. I have some friends throughout my life that have taken their life. And the first one that happened was when I was in 7th grade, and I had a friend that I always saw at the rec center all the time. His name was Hunter, and he was a close friend of mine. I saw him there. We played basketball. We really enjoyed each other's presence. He was one of my close friends. And I remember I went to the rec center one day, and I asked my friend, "Where's Hunter?" And he said, well, he wasn't able to come today. And so I remember being sad, and I go home and I go to bed that night. And I remember having a dream. And in this dream, I saw my friend Hunter, and he was in a black room with a spotlight right on his face, just like these lights that are happening to me with this video right now. There was a spotlight on him. And in the spotlight, he was tied to a chair. He couldn't move. He had ropes around his ankles and his wrists. And it started out really small, but he started saying the word help. And he said, help, help, help. And he started getting louder and louder to the point where my ears were ringing because he was screaming the word help so loud. And I remember I woke up in a panic. And I was like, what was that all about? I didn't know what that was. Never had a dream like that before. And I remember I go to the rec center the next day. And it was a really sad summer night because when I talked to my friend, he said, last night, Hunter committed suicide. And so that broke me. And I had to work through some things. And I even had to go to counseling with some of my pastors and stuff like that, just because it was something that was very hard on me. And I didn't know how to express it to people or tell it to people, even some of my closest friends. And later in high school, it was about sophomore, junior year, I had a friend named Andrew. Andrew and I weren't super close, but I talked to him. And I coincidentally sat next to him in a lot of my classes. It just seemed random and it seemed coincidental, but I don't think it was. And he was someone who was very shy at first, kind of thought outside of the box, had a unique mind and a unique way of thinking of things. And I remember just striking up conversations with him in class when I wasn't supposed to be talking, but I could not ever stop talking like some of you watching this video right now. And I just remember he would share his heart with me about some things. And I remember one night I went to bed and I had that same exact dream. But this time it was with my friend Andrew. Same thing. He had his wrist tied, his ankle tied around the chair, spotlight on him. He was saying this word help and he started screaming it in agony. And I woke up in a panic. And the next day I find out that he committed suicide overnight as well. And one of the things that he left in his suicide note was that he felt like he had no one to talk to. He felt like he didn't have any close friends. And that's something that broke me as well. And I wasn't very vulnerable at the time because I didn't know how to process the things that were happening. But I did know that I was getting those dreams for a reason, and that I could have been the change in his life. I could have been that friend to make a difference, to make an impact. I could have saved his life. And I'm not blaming myself, but I'm saying I could have stepped out because God was giving me these dreams to try to help one of his children. And so I remember later on, and it was my first year of college, and I had a friend named Alex Stone. And Alex Stone was someone who was very charismatic, very energetic, very happy. You would never suspect anything was wrong with Alex. He seemed like he had his whole life figured out. He was a really good athlete. I played sports with him, and he was even doing really well in school. Someone you would look at and think, I want to be like that. You would really look up to him in a lot of ways. But I remember I went to bed one night, and Alex and I didn't really talk when I was in college. But I went to bed and I had the same dream with him. And I remember I broke out my messenger and I tried to call him through Messenger and I got no answer. And then the next day, I find out that Alex Stone killed himself the evening before. And so I was distraught. And so the reason I say all of these things is that these people seemed happy on the surface. These people had smiles on their faces. They seemed like they had everything figured out. They seemed like great people on the outside. But on the inside, they were battling with things. They were dealing with things. They felt lonely. They felt like they didn't have anyone to connect with. They felt like they were empty on the inside, depressed, lonely, stress and anxiety, all these things that led them to make these decisions. And part of what could have saved their life was an intimate relationship with somebody that they knew they could have relied on, somebody that they knew they could have counted on. And so, as I said before, intimacy is something that God has placed inside of us to desire to be known. And there's a scientific study that shows a 75-year-long period of time. They studied 300 different men. And the purpose of this study was to find out what truly makes mankind happy. And what they discovered was something very interesting. The men who didn't spend their time collecting materialistic items, materialistic things, money, and all of that success, the men that focused on their relationships, their friendships, were the men that were truly happy and lived a happy life. But the men that just focused on the money and the success and the materialistic things, they were depressed and they were lonely, and some of them even committed suicide in the end. So what makes mankind truly happy is this desire for connection, connecting with one another, getting involved in a community, feeling like you have brothers and sisters that have your back. And so I just want to read you a quote from a man named Paul J. Waddell, and he writes a book called Becoming Friends. And this quote says, "Perhaps the greatest human need is a need for intimacy. Yes, to survive physically, we need food, shelter, and clothing. But to survive spiritually and emotionally, we need intimacy." And that's so true. To survive physically, we need clothes to avoid and protect from the elements. We need food to sustain and nourish our bodies. And we need shelter to also protect us from the elements. We need these physical things to protect us so that we can survive. But to survive spiritually and emotionally, we need connection. We need intimacy with God and with one another. The last thing that I want you guys to walk away with is to know what is on the inside of you. 1 John chapter 4, verse 4 says, you dear children are from God and have overcome them, because the one who is in you is greater than the one who is in the world. What is in you is greater than depression. What is in you is greater than stress or anxiety. What is in you is greater than sexual or physical abuse. What is in you is greater than hate, anger, or envy. What is in you is greater than loneliness. What is in you is greater than those who have hurt you and left you damaged. Or should I say, who is in you? Who is in you is greater than any sickness, any disease, any physical ailment or disability. Who lives in you is greater than death itself. Jesus lives inside of you and me, the one who conquered death, hell, and the grave. And if he is for me, then who can stand against me? See, Jesus lives on the inside of you. And if he lives on the inside of you, then you are never alone.